Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our very first Common Ground event of 2023. And we're excited to have you with us. My name is Nancy Easterling. It is my honor to serve as the Executive Director of Historic Southerly. We want to thank everyone who believes in the work that we're doing and supports it. Particularly in the last year, we did get from the National Trust for Historic Preservation a Telling the Full History grant. And for there are companies such as Boeing who are really supporting our work in equity. But then there are so many of you on the screen tonight and in our community that make our work possible, and we are very grateful. So tonight we are honoring somebody who is near and dear to so many of our hearts. If you don't know her or did not have the chance to know her personally, you will feel like you got to know a little bit about her tonight and get to know what an incredible woman she is. Her birthday will actually be this Friday, the 24th, and it's fitting that her birthday month is Black History Month, so we can commemorate everything at the same time. But we're honoring the life of Agnes Kane Callum tonight, and she and John Hanson Briscoe are really the foundation of the Descendants Project that started in 2017 and the foundation of our site's interpretation and so much more. You're going to get to learn all about her. So a few housekeeping things just before I get started and introduce our panelists for this evening. This is a Zoom webinar, so I know a lot of you are very, very familiar with Zoom. Most of our webinars are usually on a different platform where we control the view. You have the power tonight. Do you know up in your right-hand corner, there is a view option? You can make the speaker big if you'd like and have them fill up the screen so whoever's talking will be big on your screen. If you'd like to keep us all in Hollywood squares, you can do that too, whichever one you prefer. We are going to be screen sharing some photos of Agnes, and when we do that, Zoom tends to automatically put all of our photos on the right-hand side of your screen. Don't worry if we're blocking something. You can minimize our photos. You can make it so just the one person is seen, or you can make them go across the top. All of this is in your command, so you'll be able to do whichever view is going to work better for you. So let me introduce some of the panelists that were gracious enough to be part of bringing to life Agnes Kane Callum tonight. First, of course, is her daughter, Martina Callum, Dr. Martina Callum, who also served on our board for 10 years, who lives up in Baltimore and saw the journey, lived the journey with her mom. We also have with us tonight Mr. Sam Baldwin, who is fortunate enough to be married to our board president, who I'm sure he'd say that is his great good fortune. But Sam has done all of us an incredible, given all of us an incredible gift, because Sam, a few years ago, wrote a book, the John Hanson Briscoe Historical Project. And this book not only talked about John Hanson, but has extensive sections on Southerly and extensive sections on Agnes Kane Callum. And they're excited. If you haven't read it before, we're going to make sure we share that in chat. Meredith Taylor, former professor of theater and dance and an emeritus of St. Mary's College. Meredith was also on the board for 10 years. And there are few people I can point to who have had a greater impact on what we do as interpretation on the site. She has been the project lead on almost every project of note here, or part of it. She has been at the heart and soul and so much, and she certainly knows about Agnes's work. We have with us Mr. Jerome Spears. Now, and if you missed it before, it's still out there for you to see. Jerome has been a presenter for us twice. January of 21, he helped chronicle his incredible genealogical journey for us. And I can't tell you the number of people that were emailing us and saying, oh my gosh, that was my family. I can't believe he knew that. Then he came back last year for our Common Ground programming, where he is now, to all of us, the DNA guru. What do you need to know to really follow your DNA and learn? Let that help aid you in your genealogical journey. And then we have Mr. Dante Eubanks. Reverend Dante Eubanks, if you're from St. Mary's County, I can't believe you don't know him already. But he also has been doing incredible genealogical research. He and Jerome were both Sotterly descendants. And Dante actually is related to Agnes's family. So between these two incredible genealogists, we're so grateful that they're here to share their perspectives and their stories. And then we also have with us tonight Miss Gwen Bankins. Gwen Bankins retired from SMECO last year, but not retired from anything else. She's still the busiest person I know. Also a relative of Agnes Callum, also a Sotterly descendant. But Gwen is the secretary of our board of trustees and the head of our preservation, restoration, and interpretation committee. So before we get started, Gwen, I didn't know if you would like to say a few words.
First, I'd like to thank everyone for joining, and on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank everyone for supporting this event in honor of Agnes. For those of you who knew Agnes or will learn about her by the end of this presentation, she is a force to be reckoned with. Just like you cannot control the wind, she was determined to uncover the roots and unlock the hidden history that never should have been hidden. Everyone has value and history is living. If by the end of this discussion tonight, you will know history has a heartbeat of its own. And here at Historic Sotterly, that is John Hanson and Agnes Kane Callum. So let's start the journey to honor an incredible mother, woman, friend, researcher, and family member.
Wonderful. I'm already seeing a lot of you sign into the chat. We always ask you to sign in and let us know where you're joining from. So please do that. And Martina, who I'm going to call on first, guess what? Your sister from Florida is on right now. So Agnes's other daughter, Agnes Lightfoot, is joining us from Florida. So welcome. I'm so glad you're here tonight. And so many other Sotterly descendants are out there and so many from our community. I'm loving seeing the names go by. It's fabulous. So I'm going to start sharing a few pictures, but Martina, as I'm getting ready to do this, we all know our relationships with our parents are different. When we're growing up, that's just mom, and it's just mom. So what was it like to watch Agnes and to see all that she accomplished, especially so much of what we know about her and her started at a later age than it might have been for other people?
Well, it wasn't so much watching her accomplish things. She was always doing something, and did I lose you? Oh, she always had an activity going on, something to benefit the community. Whatever she did, she put her all in it and some of yours to get everything going. And it's just, amazing when I look back, what is this, 40 years later? It amazes me, what she did. I just thought this is the work she does, when you step in and help her when she tells you. You don't volunteer, she's like the military. That's how she got her volunteers.
So when you see all that she overcame in her life, talk to us a little bit about her life and all that she didn't let anything stand in her way. Tell us a little bit about that development as a person.
Well, I think she looked at challenges. You could not tell her that she couldn't do something, or that she wasn't qualified, because the next time you saw her, she would be more than qualified for whatever task it was. She was always very positive, very, very task oriented. She didn't suffer fools. She didn't tolerate laziness or wasting time. She pointed out that we really don't have a lot of time on this earth, and we need to do our best while we're here.
and a lot of people won't realize what she did for years and when she went back to school. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, my mother actually she was a high school dropout. And later in life, she sold cosmetics for a Black cosmetic company. She sold insurance for one of the oldest insurance African American insurance companies in the country, North Carolina Mutual. And then from there, she got a job as a psychiatric aide at Rosewood State Hospital. And they realized she would take notes on the patients that she had to care from. And one of the doctors noted that she took very complete and comprehensive notes and suggested that she apply to get into their nursing program. And she applied to get into the nursing program, and at the same time, she studied to get her GED. My mother was 16 years old. I was 16 years old when my mother got her GED. And I remember it so well because if you go in the bookstore, they have these books, Prepare for Your GED, and they look like telephone books. And she had one. She went through that book from beginning to end. She probably could have got a bachelor's degree and we just didn't know. And from there, 2 years, a year later, I started college. My sister had graduated and had moved to upstate New York. And my mother would chastise you about your grades. And my sister kind of told her one time, well, you're so smart, why don't you go to college? And she said, I'll show you how to go to college. So my very first semester of college, when I was registering for myself, I registered my mother like in just one class. And she got an A. And then the second semester, we upped it to 2 classes. And a year later, I looked up and she was a full-time student. She was a full-time student and graduated with honors.
Oh my gosh, that is absolutely.
Yeah.
And what age was she when she graduated?
She would have been, let me see, she was still pretty young. She was like 16, 25. She was probably about 46, 47.
That is impressive.
When she got her bachelor's. Then when she got her bachelor's, I left the area to go to pharmacy school and then go to medical school. And in the interim, she went back and got a master's degree. She loves school.
So when did you first realize she had a passion for genealogy?
Well, it didn't start out as a passion for genealogy. It started out as a report for a history class that she was doing while at Morgan. She was writing this paper, and she needed information about St. Mary's County. And as she started finding information, she told me that some of the documents that she ran across had the last names of people that she heard her father talk about. So she went to my grandfather whenever she would find something and say, I found, she would find like receipts for a church pew. Like maybe the Fenwick family paid $2 to rent a pew in the church for the whole year. And the receipt was still available. She found it in the records. So the more she worked on her report, the deeper she started digging. And genealogy is really fascinating. I tell people today, never worry about exacting revenge on anybody. You can do one of 2 things. You can show them how to play a slot machine, or you can introduce them to genealogy. That will keep them up all night.
I see Jerome laughing his head off over there because Jerome is feeling that pain.
Yeah, it
Oh
works.
my goodness. I'm sure, Doctor, you're not on my screen right now, but I know you would be too. Oh my gosh. They know once you get going, you just can't let it go. It starts that. So I know that you also I'm sure you heard your mom talking to some of the oral histories. People will be talking about family history to your mom. Do you remember those talks?
Oh, absolutely. My mother was a master storyteller. We were very fortunate because when she learned something, she shared it with her children. You know, we'd be at the dinner table. She would tell us about different holidays and things when she was a kid, or something that her father told her about growing up in St. Mary's County. And she had a way of sharing the information that made you feel as if you were right there. She could weave these wonderful stories about St. Mary's County and about the information that she was finding. I really believe she had a relationship with all these people that she found this information on.
Yeah, she did. She was a storyteller.
Oh,
She
she was a
truly
master
was.
storyteller. Yeah.
So, on the screen right now, I have one of the first times that she brought people down. The Kane family came down, and the reason I'm just mentioning what you see on the screen right now is I'm sure people wondered at first when she said, "Guess where I'm taking you? I'm taking you down to a plantation." What do you remember the family's reaction to that was?
Well, some were curious and some were like, "You're taking us where?" And people didn't want to see the slave cabin. She taught us to embrace our history, regardless of what it was. She said, "No, this is a part of you. You can't hide this."
Yeah, and
The
that
more
was,
stories she told, yes, and the more stories she told, it became so much easier. You wanted to know. You wanted to know everything that she knew.
she was, and I think this was a group that came down, also a lot of relatives, a lot of families. And I was lucky enough to be there a few times when she brought families, but I know this started in the 70s, way before the foundation took over. And
Yeah.
when did you first come down with her, Martina?
Well, actually, this photograph was before she even published Kane Butler genealogy. She was still gathering information.
Wow.
She was still good. My grandfather is in this picture. He's on the right top row next to the lady in yellow.
Yeah.
I know my sister's in there somewhere with her cap on backwards.
And this is going, thanks for pointing that out right now.
Oh, I just thought she looked so cute. Everybody was so young, and it was just so long ago.
Yeah, I mean, this journey started so long ago, and to the point that you made, and I know there have been many people who've said this in the community. She embraced the slave cabin when most people felt it should come down. And
yeah, no, she had very, very strong feelings about that. She told me my responsibility on the board, because I joined the board after she was off the board. She says, just watch the slave cabin. Don't let anything happen to the slave cabin. And I'm thinking, sure, mine. I'm thinking, oh my God, we were going to get the money to save the slave cabin. But that was her primary concern, as it should have been, because it's part of our history.
Yeah, as I said, she embraced that side and that structure much quicker than anyone else did. And she went on to talk with so many stories. I know here on the screen now that you'll see her when she received an honorary doctorate. And then she was also recognized as Woman of the Year for the state of Maryland toward the end of her life. And, you saw these incredible recognitions from the community that really started being, more and more people coming. when did you realize truly how transformative and remarkable she was?
Uh,
Because rather than just,
Probably,
that's my mom. That's just my mom.
yeah. Well, she instilled in us that there's certain things and opportunities that we have to avail ourselves of. And if it comes along, you're supposed to, take advantage of it. I can remember when I was a medical student, thinking that was the worst place in the world and I wanted to quit. And, she said, this is not about you. This is not about you. You've been given this opportunity. You don't have a choice. You got to do it. And she just had that Midas touch. She was an incredible organizer, always very focused, and probably, played a big part. And I'm quite sure she did. Not only played a big part, but was an influence on her children. For example, there's an organization called the National Sales Network. My sister was a business major. There was no organization 30 years ago of these Black salespeople across the country. And my sister was one of the founding members. Now, where did that motivation come from? Came from Agnes. It came from Agnes.
You passed that
But,
down.
when she was inducted into the Women's Hall of Fame, we're like, wow, she was a big deal. That along with the honorary degree. We're very proud.
You should be. The whole family just had to be so incredibly proud. And up on the screen now is a day that all of us will remember. We wish Agnes had been there to see it. It was 2 years after her passing that we were able to get the slave cabin exhibit up. And of course, it was dedicated to her memory. And and that's her beautiful sister who was sharing the moment with us. Everybody who was there will remember. And it was a very special day. It's a very special day. Well, Martino, I'm sure we're going to be coming back to you to do some more remembrances. I know I already saw there've been questions coming up, so I'm sure you're going to be called on again. But let me turn for a moment to Sam Baldwin. So Sam, here you wrote this book called The John Hanson Briscoe Historical Project. You knew your father-in-law was in poor health. And we're going to be doing, for any of you who don't know, on April 19th, we're going to be doing part 2 of this series on John Hanson Briscoe. But Sam started this incredible online book, and I know Chrissy is going to put this in the chat, so you can certainly access it if you would like to go see it. And this book, which seemed like the logical thing, was to focus on John Hanson. You ended up doing not only an extensive sections on Soderly, but you did extensive sections, really extensive sections on Agnes. Tell us a little bit about how that came about and when you realized that had to happen.
Well, I interviewed my father-in-law, John Hanson, probably about 30 times while he was dealing with cancer and chemotherapy. And the more I interviewed him, certain themes kept repeating. And I wasn't planning to write a story, but the story just sort of came together. And when he passed away, I thought I would use his life in politics and as a judge, lawyer, his relationship with Soderly, as a vehicle to tell the story of St. Mary's County, because the Briscoes were at Soderly for about 100 years, and that was a very transformative 100 years. You had slavery, you had the Civil War, Reconstruction, segregation, desegregation, etc. So many of those stories could be told either through the Briscoes or Soderly or the county, the broad county. So as I was researching John Hanson and going through the different archives that were available to me, of course, Agnes Callum was very prominent in the materials that I was reading. And once again, I wasn't initially planning to write about Agnes, but the story just came together. There was so much material, a lot of which you've already shown on the screen here. So when I finished my interviews with John Hanson and knew I was going to write a broader story of the county, my very first interview was with Agnes, and I'd never met her before. I was familiar with the name, but I really thought she was so important to the history of Sotterley that she had to be the first person I interviewed in a way. And it's hard to explain, but I really felt as if I needed to see her and have her blessing to write this story. So I was able to find, a contact, how I could meet her up in Baltimore. Drove up to Baltimore. It was the first time we'd ever met. And right from the start, it was a very warm meeting, and we went to her room, and she had a bookshelf with a lot of her material. And as we would talk, she'd say, "Get me that book," or "Get me that book." And she'd open a certain page to illustrate a point she was trying to make. So it was a really great interview. And Martina may remember, since I was up in Baltimore, Martina was my second interview. And Martina has never met a stranger. Martina is never at a loss for words. And I had a great time. We met at the home that I'd grown up in Baltimore. And we chatted for a couple hours there. And it got to be dinner time. And I said, "Martina, let me take you out to dinner." So we went out to dinner at a restaurant in Baltimore, and the only ones that didn't enjoy that meal were the wait staff, because we were there maybe an hour or more after the restaurant closed. Martina just wanted to tell more and more stories. So getting back to writing about Agnes, yes, she had a wealth of material, most of which was in the Sotterley archives. And she helped me tell part of the story of St. Mary's County because of the research she had done.
So chapter 4, Sotterley, equals at last. Tell me how that came to pass.
Well, the interesting thing is John Hanson and Agnes were both the great-grandchildren of a slave owner and the enslaved at Sotterley. And the simplest storyline I think I have is John Hanson's great-grandfather owned Agnes's great-grandfather. But together in the 70s, they were raising awareness of Sotterley and not only trying to preserve the mansion, but more or equally as important, trying to save that slave cabin. And the national news picked up on it, including CBS Sunday Morning. And I know you have a picture of them being interviewed on the front lawn at Sotterley. But what was great was this: the CBS Sunday Morning segment might have been 4 minutes, but there was a hot mic recording of about a 30-minute conversation that took place between the CBS reporter, Agnes, and John Hanson. And that reporter was taking John Hanson and Agnes back to their great-grandparents' day, saying, "What would your great-grandparents think seeing the two of you here?" And what Agnes said was, "Where I'm sitting on the front lawn of Sotterley, my great-grandfather could never have crossed an imaginary line and come up to the mansion there. It was not allowed." And what John Hanson said was, John Hanson was observing that Agnes's great-grandfather didn't own the clothes on his back, but Agnes, being a board member of the Sotterley Foundation, one of the 12 members, John Hanson said she is now a 1/12 owner of Sotterley. And that is how much things had changed. And I believe it was in response to that Agnes said, "Yes, we are now equals at last." And I thought it just summed up that journey, summed up what I wanted to try to say in that chapter. And so that's where the chapter title came from. It came right from Agnes making that observation of that long journey that she researched that Martina was talking about. her great grandparents coming from Solderly up to Baltimore. And you know, I'll come back to Martina. When I interviewed Martina, and she was saying how proud her grandfather was that Martina was a doctor, graduated from the George Washington University. That was quite an incredible journey and through all these generations.
So when you were talking to Agnes, and I just can't imagine, I was fortunate enough to listen to her speak numerous times. Was there anything that she told you that just really hit you, that maybe either you didn't realize or just the way she said it in her interview with you? And I can see her, as you were telling me, get that book, get that book, get that book. I can see that. I could actually see it while you were describing it. It was fabulous. But what were some of the moments that she spoke about? And did she have her genealogy up on the wall while you were there?
No. She didn't have the genealogy up on the wall. I think that was more from her house in Baltimore. And when I saw her, she was in the retirement community. And there wasn't so much what she told me during that interview. It's just how warm she was, how welcoming she was. She didn't know me. And it was really the first time we'd met, and it was a great interview, and it was everything I could have hoped for. Now, her material, and she wrote an awful lot. We've just sort of scratched the surface, and I'm sure Jerome is going to talk about a lot of it in his work on descendants. But, you know, her work really kind of opened the door for a lot of what I wanted to say. As I found out more and more going through different archives, it all came back to Agnes was the first to write about it in St. Mary's County. And I was kind of sharing on the internet what Agnes had already written in hard copy and trying to tie it all together with a broader story.
And, you know, all culminating. So all those articles that were going by on the screen, just so you all know, Sam has managed to get these in digital, get them in digital form, get these so we can't lose them. And you saw how many articles were written on those two. And did she ever comment to you what it was like to have so many people clamoring, trying to get her story? Did she mention that at all to you?
You know, she never did that, but I really, I bet she would never have used that word clamoring, because she was so sharing. It was a pleasure for her, you know, not to be recognized, because she wasn't seeking recognition, but she had all this knowledge, and she was just so willing to share it. And it just flowed like water.
Yeah, there was a picture that you all saw earlier in your screen with her talking to school children. There was one where she talked to the College of Southern Maryland. She was a teacher by heart. You're absolutely right. And she was very humble, but she just wanted acknowledgement. And this photo you have up now is when not only had they gotten her involvement and John Hanson together, people seeing them had not only helped to preserve the site, but Solderly became a National Historic Landmark in 2000. And there she is in the front row with so many others that helped to make that a reality. And as again, for all of you, if you are not familiar with it, I know Chrissy was going to put that in the chat. Chrissy, our marketing manager, is on tonight monitoring the chat. She's going to have that. John Hanson Briscoe Historical Project. Google it. There's going to be so much incredible information far beyond what we have the time to share tonight. Please make sure you go and see that. So let me go now to Miss Meredith Taylor, and I would love to have you talk a little bit. When Meredith was on the board, we were still struggling. We definitely knew we wanted to talk about, be more inclusive in our story, but the slave cabin wasn't open all the time. We weren't, there were, we needed to look at our tours differently. How do we standardize them? How do we make sure the inclusive stories are being told? What do we need to do to make sure that everyone who comes on site has this connection? And Meredith, you have done so much to advance that interpretation that you not only took Agnes's oral history, but she was the project lead for our IMLS grant where we redid our tours, created new guided tours, created introductory video. Our Land, Lives, and Labor, our first permanent exhibit, went in under your direction. You supported the creation of our slave cabin exhibit as well. The videos of our Talking and Walking Common Ground that we're going to be screening again next month. So many things. And I think you would probably say, looking at this picture of then to now on the slave cabin, that Agnes was the start for that. So I wanted to know if you could address a little bit her inspiration in those years where we were struggling and it was really hard to move forward.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit about this wonderful woman. And actually, you had suggested you might ask me about sort of the first time I became aware of her, and which made me put my own history into order, so I thank you for that as well. For someone who loves history, I'm terrible with remembering dates. And so thinking about how did I first become aware of her, and I guess it was through Southerly. That was before I was on the board. But the first real memory I have is a talk that she gave on the Civil War, and it was in Leonardtown. And I did, in fact, go up and afterwards and ask her, I said, I would love to interview you. Is there any chance I could do that? And she very gracefully said no. So I'm just saying, I think one of the most remarkable things about her is the things that Sam has been saying, is that her generosity, her willingness to share was just phenomenal. But in that way, I mean, someone, that she had no idea who I was, and I walk up and say, So that was the first time. And then in terms of her generosity, just in my own personal history with her, I came across, as I was looking through things, a little note that I had written to her, thanking her for agreeing to attend a performance of the play, The Cocoonery, and respond to the play in a post-performance discussion. I'm reading this little note. So since the play deals with St. Mary's County history, your perspective will be very valuable. I'm enclosing a copy of the current draft, et cetera, et cetera. So 2 p.m. on Sunday, April 23rd, Agnes came and gave a phenomenal, watched the play, gave a phenomenal response. She brought her books, so she did take advantage of that chance to let people know what she did. But that again, just the generosity and being willing to do that, and so that was the start really of our relationship, and I think we really hit it off. We were both loved the whole uncovering of history, pretty addicted to that, and the importance of telling the truth about history, and she was so practical, and we both hated wasting time. Like to work and get things done. And so then when I asked her if we could do the interview for Southerly, and that was in 2008, that was a couple of years later, she said yes. And again, I think one thing that was really remarkable about it was that she had pretty advanced Parkinson's. And again, she was completely willing, with that she wasn't, she seemed to have no vanity. I'm sure maybe she did, but that she was willing to do that because it was important history and she wanted to tell the story. And that's what was important to her. And the slave cabins, which is what you asked me about, was tremendously important to her. She said, that's my place here, that's my house. And that she felt that sense of ownership and in a very, in no way was she sentimental or nostalgic about it, but just the sense that those were her roots and those were her people and how much she valued them. And how much positive she saw in what they had been able to accomplish in the fact, how they got over. And I learned a great deal from her. And she also, I asked her to be a consultant on the first grant we did with the IMLS grant, where we reinterpreted the site. And she did do that. The second big grant that we got, where we did the corn crib exhibit, which tells the story of the workers at Solderly over 300 years, basically. Yes, there is the picture of it. And she was not really able to participate at that point so much, but I would call her, and she wasn't getting out much. She was not living on her own in Baltimore. And we would have long conversations. And when I was lucky enough to get her, and she was free. And she was so willing to just talk. And we talked about the history, we talked about the exhibit. I tried very hard to get her to write a story. Because we talked about the idea of, well, she was very reluctant to do any kind of, to go outside of what was, like any good historian, anything that there was not evidence to support, she didn't want to really go there. But she certainly was willing to think about it with me and to imagine and to talk about it based on the evidence that is there. And so I was very interested in creating stories. We had exhibits in the corn crib here, a day in the life of an enslaved person, a particular enslaved person, and that was an imaginary person. And then we had a day in the life of James Scriber, who was a real person who worked at Solderly, and then a day in the life of Ruth and Bernard Barber, who were 20th century workers, the parents of Donald Barber, who's here. And so I tried to get her to write one of these. And she was intrigued, and we talked about it, but I think it was just kind of getting the energy to do that. So, is there another question?
You also included, I mean, for those who don't know her, if you go into the slave cabin, you'll see her dedication there. But Meredith, you also included her very much. Not only her teachings, her ideas, but her voice,
Yes,
and her words are captured in this exhibit.
yeah, I love the quote that hangs over the door. They think it's a white people's plantation, but our roots are here too. The Kane roots. And the beautiful thing about this historic place is that for once, the slaves are included in the story. Agnes, Kane, Callum. And of course, that made us all very happy to
Yes,
have that kind of endorsement. The only other thing I wanted to say in terms of the impact of her work on me, because you asked about that interview. At one point near the end of the interview in 2008, I asked her basically if there were people come here and guests are not here very long. There's so much to say, so much to do. What's the one thing that you think is most important to include? And she said that talking about her people, she had gone through all the accomplishments and all the skills that they had, and then she said, well, I would say that they survived, and there was just like an aha moment for me, because I mean, on the obvious, on the surface, of course, I mean, if they hadn't survived, she wouldn't be here. But that to me was saying something much more, which was, how did they do it? That they survived such a system as slavery that would, dehumanize people. How did they do it? And they clearly maintained, as she talked about them, their humanity. And so that set me off on a whole new search to answer that question. And I, in fact, have a book, which may or may not ever be published, but that was inspired by my experiences with her, and in particular, that quote. So that's how, I mean, she's impacted me in many ways, and certainly that is one of them. But I would say that just I learned so much from her, and it's just come through in all of my work and how I think about the world.
She did emphasize that these were people. Stop, as we today in today's society are trying to have people understand, to use the word that these were people who were enslaved, and not that they were slaves. Slaves is just something that was owned. These were people who this was done to them. She wanted to humanize them. And as you were talking, I remember her doing that and just bringing to people to life and the resilience and the strength. And that was such a huge importance to her to make sure people understood that. And Meredith, it comes through in the way you have used those in all of the things that we do. And we are so thrilled and proud that you brought Agnes to life in all of these different areas in so many ways. Let me go now to Mr. Jerome. Jerome, tell me a little bit about when you sent me an email earlier, because I was wondering, when were you first aware of Agnes? Tell me when you first became aware.
So great. I first became aware of Agnes through her work. If you're from Southern Maryland, St. Mary's County, Calvert County, Lower Prince George's, and you're working on your own genealogy, you're going to run into Agnes King Callum's work. I mean, you could not be studying this area and not stumble into something that she had her hands on. And every time I would turn around, there's that name again, Agnes King. And then you go to the archives in Maryland online, the slave statistics, and help prepare this. Every time you turn around, I kept seeing her name. And and it was wrapped up in some of the most insightful information as an African American researcher, particularly when we were able to see the records where the former slaveholders were trying to be given reparations for their enslaved, and so they enumerated the people they had enslaved, because similar to what happened in Washington, D.C., where they got reparations. Maryland was trying to do the same thing in 1864. And so they had to list who the people were. And so those names, those full names of those individuals with ages and everything else, that predates the 1870 census. And for a lot of African Americans, that's the first time we get to see the full names of our ancestors. And Agnes King Callum was responsible for that. So, I mean, it was just incredible to be able to see those names, see them previous to the 1870 census, be able to connect dots. And also, we were able to then make the linkage between the enslaved and the slaveholder, which is another critical piece that many folks, at least in the African American community, have so much trouble with in some instances. But she leveled that hill. She made that journey so much more manageable with some of the information that she was able to provide. If you're from Southern Maryland, everyone talks about it. We're all related. Everybody's related to everybody else. So you go far enough down the line, you're going to run into some surnames that link to other surnames that maybe more closely relate to you. And In fact, Martina and I, we're still working on this, but probably on my Bankins and Jordan side, we're cousins as well. We just haven't, I'm still doing some digging to stitch that all together. It might be Butler or Golf. We're still working on it, but everybody's related to everybody else. And so as Agnes was working on her history and she decided, well, I'm here, I see other names, let me pull that into what I'm doing. So she helped work on all of our history while she was working on hers. And that's a gift that we can never pay back. So we just have to pay it forward.
Oh, that's incredible. Now, how old were you when you started your genealogy?
Well, you know, this goes back to Alex Haley roots in the 70s. When we all got mesmerized by that story, by actually seeing what maybe we heard bits and pieces about, and Alex Haley's 7-day adventure, we got to see it from Africa to the Middle Passage to landing in Indianapolis and the whole bit, and to actually visualize this for the first time was an incredible thing. I was in college at that time, and soon after that, our grandparents got us together to talk about our history. And so we began to stitch things together. So I would say in the 70s is when I started, but at college, life, other things, the Army, before you know it, a lot of years go by before you really circle back to it. And so around 2009 is when I really started wanting to roll up my sleeves and pick up the trail and make sense of it. But we were fortunate enough to have recorded our grandparents in that 79 discussion. So that allowed for me to be able to go back and hear in their own voices a lot of the information that I was listening to, but I wasn't listening with that third ear and seeing with that third eye that a genealogist has to be able to do to really make sense of stuff. So I would say 79 is the start, but really 2009 is when it kind of got put on steroids.
You can imagine Agnes doing all of this before internet, before anything like that. We all need to remember what it was like to do research of any kind. And she was doing this incredible research that you used and so many others in a much tougher environment. Let's put
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, if you think about, I think she was on the ground floor for, you know, many of us are involved with the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society, better known as OGS, and James Dent Walker down in Washington, D.C., and Agnes was in Baltimore, and I know they both had some interplay with Alex Haley as he was doing his roots thing. So in the 70s, I mean, they were all in the ground floor building those foundational blocks that many of us are standing on today. And we certainly don't want to squander in this time with the resources and opportunities that we have. We certainly don't want to squander the opportunities to take this to newer and higher levels, given what the folks before us did and what they had to go through to even get from first base to second base. And so I'm always mindful of that struggle that they must have had early on. And I'm trying to ensure that I'm leaving as many crumbs as possible, because I want to do it in at least a small part for the folks that are coming behind me, some of what Agnes did for me coming up as well.
Oh, that's amazing, Jerome. Thank you so much. Now, Reverend Dante Eubanks, who is actually related to Agnes, also a very notable genealogist. In fact, tracing a lot of different family roots through here, even through the Georgetown connections that are going on. But you're related to Agnes. So tell me some of your earliest memories and knowledge of Agnes.
It was, I can pinpoint the Juneteenth celebration, and it was in 2002. We were over at Tulagi Place, and she was over in what is now the Newtown Players Theater, which was the old Lexington Park Library at the time. And she was in there because she needed to be in the cool place. She said she wasn't sitting out there in the sun. So they had her in there, and she was in there, and she was signing things for a few people, and then those of us that were part of the family, everyone's talking, hugging, laughing, and I said, "Hey, can we talk about the Butlers?" And she looked up at me and she said, "We can talk about anything else, but we're not talking about them Butlers." And we bust out laughing, and it's a beautiful thing. And as Cousin Jerome said, she shared so many different things, put me in touch with a lot of different people here in the county that I didn't even realize were connected on the Butler and Golf sides of the family. And that was a blessing. She also put in a word at the state archives, and I told her I wanted to go there and do some more on-site search there. And she said, "Oh, okay, no problem." And she called ahead, and then they in turn called me and said, "Whenever you want to come, any friend of Agnes is a friend of ours," is what they said. And that was a blessing then. But her push to bring everybody in, I think is the most memorable thing that I have, is not just, she wasn't just researching the Canes and the Butlers and the Golfs. She connected the entire community, and through Flowers of the Forest, which was a journal that went out to the family. She began publishing every piece of artifact history about all the communities, Scotland, Beachville, St. Indigo's, Valley Lee, Piney Point, Drayton, Leonardtown. She did the churches and all the historical references that was going on at the time. And then she did pieces on the first African-American teachers and those that owned land and those that were entrepreneurs and business owners, back in the olden days when it was tough for Blacks to be business owners. But it was because of her work and sharing that with the masses. She left so many breadcrumbs that for generations to come will be able to turn to and say, that's my family. I'm connected to that. And it's all because of her work.
That the Black Genealogical Journey was what you were referring to. How often did that come out, Dante? Do you have any idea?
In the early days, I remember it was coming out, I want to say on a quarterly basis. And then there were so many that were also on site at the local libraries, at St. Mary's College. And then also a few pieces were donated to the Maryland State Archives, along with her colored troops and also the slave statistics.
Well, we saw so many articles that were written about Agnes and then Agnes and John Hanson's story. But this piece came out, and I know they were saying a sense of ownership, meaning of help being a trustee on the site. When we were talking the other day, I thought you had some other interesting perspectives on what that really can mean, what that might have probably meant to her.
Yeah, the sense of ownership. We often in the Black community, talking about plantations was not, top on the priority list. Talking about slavery was not something that, our elders, our ancestors wanted to talk about. It was a painful history. But as time has progressed, as the decades have progressed, and education is abound, I believe Cousin Agnes' sense of ownership it was not just a plantation where our ancestors worked. They weren't just slaves. They were people. They were valued. They had value. They had families. They raised their families. So they not only just worked there, they lived there, they thrived, they survived. So Sotterly's story is our story. St. Mary's story is our story, and we have to take ownership of that. And we can't be ashamed of that. We can't change anything about the past, but we can certainly shape and redefine the future and how everyone looks at, our history. And that's the ownership. It take ownership of your narrative, take ownership of your story, and share it, because someone else out there is searching, someone else out there is trying to find their connection, and you just may be the new change agent to usher them in to this important history.
So beautifully said, Dante. Thank you. So Miss Gwen, you've had your journey also, and certainly Agnes has been part of your journey, coming to now be currently the secretary of our Board of Trustees, but certainly I don't think you really wanted to be part of Sotterly at the beginning. So tell us a little bit about how Agnes shaped that journey for you.
Well, in a picture they show, it was 7th grade. It was actually 1978. The little girl with her arms crossed, looking like she didn't want to be there, was me, because I did not want to be there. This is a few months following the Alex Haley story of Roots, because if you remember, history was hidden. So to me, my ancestors lived down the street from me. They were beaten and they labored in the fields. And I went to Salisbury University and took a class called From Slavery to Freedom. And that's when I found out, wait a minute, we weren't just property. We built this community. Having that, and then trying to understand what kind of person can survive physically the demands of the institution of slavery, the character, the dignity, the respect, the resilience. You had to have great intelligence to survive, but yet you were not allowed to learn to read or write. I started researching my dad's family in 5th grade, but then Agnes Kane, Callum came along, and the Kanes took over a couple of years later in 7th grade. And to tell you that I have been involved with Sotterly Plantation, Sotterly Foundation, Historic Sotterly for 45 years, that's over half of my life. I've seen the journey. I knew the family that owned me, but actually didn't realize or place a connection until 2000, when you guys got the National Historic Landmark, and I'm watching Judge Briscoe and Agnes, just like brother and sister. There was something about that connection that there was a natural draw. There was no hate. There was mutual respect, because they had a common goal. And that was to open doors and open conversations, because our histories are shared. You cannot separate and tell the story of the manor house without telling the story of the 16 by 18 cabin below. In 2017, when that cabin was dedicated, I was sitting on the bench and the winds just overtook me. And I felt it was the winds of my ancestors saying, wrap it up. It's time to step up and do what Agnes told you to do. Agnes had always tried to get me to become more involved. And I was like, I will, as soon as I get time. And because those of you who know my volunteer work, my community, I love my community and making it a safe place. But I would tell you one thing that I can say, that I truly contribute to my great aunts and uncles, and as well as Agnes, and that's knowing my history. When they shared our history back in the 70s, I had no idea, that I didn't make the connection that it was because it wasn't in the history books. And when Agnes opened that door to let me know that my ancestors were enslaved down the street from where I live at, that really hit home. One of the things that I feel is a big issue with society today is that children don't value life because they don't understand that they come from strong people. You know, we are here because our ancestors survived. You know, so many people don't understand that. When you understand what they went through, when you understand that they still raised their families when they had next to nothing. We're talking about 13 to 14 of my relatives living in that 16 by 18 cabin. Maybe not having a pair of shoes in the winter, only one shirt, only having the rations to exist, you know, with what they got once a week, but having the smarts to live off of the land, the garden, trapping. That's something that now, if you can't microwave it, they may not be able to cook it. Well, back in the day, they had that one pot, you know, the manor house, ancestors built that. They didn't run to 84 Lumber or Lowe's to pick up the lumber. They had to cut the tree, lumber the tree, prepare it and build it. Though that skill set that's in our community, among our farmers, among our watermen, that is a learned skill that's been lost. Our ancestors were intelligent. They were not only kidnapped from a foreign land, they brought their culture, they brought their intelligence, they brought everything with them, even though you may not have been able to see it. Because without it, remember, their lives existed before slavery. And a lot of people don't remember that. They were people. They were humans before they were kidnapped and treated as property. And to me, that has led me to definitely do as she wanted me to do, which was share my voice, to have the voice of our ancestors where that cabin was once locked and those stories were once hidden, to make sure that that is never done again.
To wrap up this part, and we're going to be going to Q&A in a minute, but as a member of the board, as somebody who's seeing the work that's being done right now, what would you say when you look at pictures of our descendants, and you'll see down there in the Descendants Project, this is a screenshot off of our website, and you'll see Agnes right there on the far left, that young picture of Agnes right with John Hanson. Talk about her influence as to where we are going.
Descendants giving voice and taking ownership of historic Saddley. The conversations about a painful past, connecting our histories, being able to learn, sitting on the board of directors and sitting on preservation, restoration, interpretation. Those are not things that I learned. Those are things that Historic Saddley has to teach me how to do, so I can also be accountable. And so our descendants, through our Descendants Project, can be empowered to continue to steward Historic Saddley, but also continue to share those stories. There's still many more stories to uncover. You know, we cannot become so uncomfortable with a part of history that we can't change, but we can definitely learn from it, and we can definitely talk about it, and we can definitely make our world a better place, because the owners of the enslaved and the owners of those who enslaved us can sit down and have a conversation, that we can sit side by side and talk and walk and work together to make Saddley a historic place. It is a living, breathing example of history every day. You know, you learn something new, you know, and it takes each and every one of us to do our part, whether it's making sure that you're registered on the Descendants list, whether it's sending in donations, whether it's sharing your talent to help us keep the facility running, whether it's helping us with committees. Everyone can make a difference. And we need everyone in order to continue to keep what John Hanson and Agnes started going. They built the bridge, and we have to continue to expand that bridge. And I believe we have over 200 and some self-identified descendants living all over the world. And we have a family hour where we all can connect. I believe Agnes and John Hanson will be extremely happy. And I'm definitely going to say, with the Day of Unity and Healing that we were able to do last year, to have a descendant-led event and to have descendants participate, I believe Agnes was jumping for joy, and John Hanson was right there with her, so having people actively involved and empowering those that come behind us. We have to get our youth involved, and we have to be able to find new ways to share our stories. We have a very technologically advanced society, and when Agnes and John Hanson came along, it was the pages that were being turned. It was the paper that's being researched. So we have to keep up with the times. So we need those who can help us continue to share the story and continue the work to let people know what history was like.
And it's hard to believe the Descendants Project is now in its 6th year, Common Ground Initiative in its 5th. And it was in December of 2018, we became a UNESCO site of memory for the roots of the enslaved people. And on each and every time that we had hit one of these milestones, I know that Agnes was smiling down on us. I do. Miss Martina, I think you are off camera and off mic, but I do want to go through now, and I know that there are going to be some questions. One question from Mr. Sewell was, and I don't know who can answer this, where is Cousin Agnes's material being kept? Is it being preserved? So Martina, do you have, Martina's part of the Baltimore, and so Jerome, so are you, the Genealogical Society. What can either one of you tell us about where people can still find some of this material?
Well, the Schoenberg Library in New York has her work. The Reginald Lewis Museum, she donated the journals. The journals were written, the genealogy journal, Flower of the Forest, which was named after my great-grandfather's farm, was written over a period of 25 years. So that was donated to the Reginald Lewis Museum with a lot of her other work. In fact, she donated 17 books to the Reginald Lewis Museum. Now, if you go to Amazon.com and put her name in, all of her work right now is out of print. And that's a big task, trying to get it back up into print again. But and even here in the special collections at the main library here, the Enoch Pratt Library here in Baltimore, also has her work.
Now, anybody else have any questions? You can certainly put them into the chat, but I did want to ask somebody just asked, are any of these records public?
Well, yes, yeah, they are. I mean, they're right there in the library. If you go in special collections, you can't borrow the books, but you can use the material while you are there in the library. So it's all available. The slave schedule, the marriage certificates, statistics, the colored soldiers from St. Mary's County. It's all there.
And the Maryland Archives has all that online too.
Yes, they have quite a bit of it, yes.
There's also some of her work as well with the Associated Records at the Southern Maryland History Library at the College of Southern Maryland as well in Charles County. And then an extensive amount of her work, not the complete volumes, but an extensive amount of her work at St. Mary's College.
And are those digitized, Dante? Are they available out on have they digitized them, or do you need to go there to access them?
They're hard copy at St. Mary's and at Southern Maryland, but at St. Mary's College, they do have access to the digital archives through the Maryland State Archives from St. Mary's College as well.
As Jerome said, if you are tracing your ancestry in Southern Maryland, you are going to run into her work. There's no way you will not. And it may be one of the pieces that helps you get that clue and figure out where you need to go from here. So as we'll see if there's another question that pops up in a minute, but before we did that, I wanted to just go around to each one of you because we're talking about Agnes and her legacy, and many of you have hit on some of the points, but from your perspective, from your heart, what would you say Agnes's legacy is? And Sam, you're up in my top left corner, so I'm going to start with you.
Well, I think, and you know, and what I'm going to say is, as the son-in-law of John Hanson, and I know he was in the legislature with Ben Cardin,
Steny
who was in the
Hoyer.
legislature with Steny Hoyer, and they
Yeah.
together pumped a lot of money down into Sotterley. But I think that the main reason Sotterley is as significant as it is in the national discussion that we're having is because of Agnes. It's not because of, I mean, John Hanson was there and the two of them were together, but Agnes made it relevant in a way that the others could not have. And she opened that conversation. And, you know, the thing is also, John Hanson and Agnes grew up in the 30s. And when you grew up in the 30s and the 40s and 50s into the 60s, you did not have this conversation. You didn't talk about slavery. You didn't talk about, I think we've heard it already. It was the last thing you wanted to talk about. There was a strong sentiment in the community to burn that slave cabin. But Agnes fought. And she said that, you know, that was a symbol of how strong her ancestors were, that they could survive that system. And the other thing is the juxtaposition of the slave cabin and Sotterley Mansion, because that's another thing Agnes said. Her ancestors were not stupid. They knew how they were being treated. They knew that the beds up in that mansion had linen and so forth, and they didn't down in that cabin. You had to preserve the cabin below the mansion to drive home the point of how harsh that system was. We have that cabin preserved, as Martina said early on. Her mission was, her mother said, you've got to save that cabin. And it wasn't to glorify slavery or the antebellum or the plantation lifestyle. It was to drive that point home. That people today are the descendants of strong people who survived a very harsh story or lifestyle. Agnes got that conversation started. And for all of us on this chat tonight, we can have this conversation because she got it started.
Absolutely. Meredith, how about you? Do you have anything you'd like to add to what, or something different than what Sam has just said?
Well, between Sam and Gwen, I'm hard pressed to add anything, but it's interesting that Sam mentioned that because it was in the interview, they were not stupid. They knew that the people up the hill had lace and crystal and that lifestyle. And she said, who knows what they were thinking? But then she goes on to suggest that they maybe were thinking that they would like to have those things. And I think that that's important because they didn't see themselves as a different being in the sense, right? That they would like the same sorts of things. And I think sometimes it shows there's a lack of, that they didn't have a limited necessarily idea of who they were as humans. And also some people have said that we shouldn't try to think what were they thinking, but she certainly did go on to make that leap and try to think what were they thinking. So anyway, but so much has been said. I have nothing more to add.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Thank you. Jerome, how about you?
Well, I guess at one point we talked about the pioneer aspect of what she and others of that era, that late 70s era, what they were doing during that time when it wasn't the internet and automation and all this other stuff that we have now. And certainly my inspiration has been they did a lot with what was available, and we need to do the same, if not more, because at our fingertips we just have so many things that make our effort somewhat more manageable. And for us, and I think I said this before, but it bears repeating, we don't want to squander this opportunity. I think I saw something on one of the major testing companies just the other day where they made some reference to the fact that some archive that they had, they're getting ready to just throw the switch and make it go away. And some of the discussion in the Facebook chat are saying, give it to Family Search. If you don't want it, if it's too burdensome, if you can't maintain it, give it to somebody else. So decades of work just won't go up in smoke because you guys don't want to manage it anymore. So we don't know whether or not we're in a window where this stuff will be around for a significant amount of time going forward. And certainly the capability wasn't around in the past. So we might be in a finite window where we can get some things done, and we need to do that. We need to not squander this opportunity, and we need to maximize, bring everything to bear that we can, discover as much as we can, and provide as much to the folks that come behind us, that information, so that they will then have a less steep road to travel in terms of discovery compared to what Agnes and people in her era had to deal with, and even to a lesser extent what we're having to go through with bringing in all that technology and trying to understand it, figure out how to maximize it and make use of it, and make it palatable for a younger person to not just get bored with it or not be interested in it. We have to figure out ways to pull those following generations in and make them realize they got skin in the game. This is their history too. And so to the extent that we haven't pulled them in sufficiently enough, that's one of my charges. And I think Agnes certainly pulled folks in for my era. We now have to do the same for the folks that are coming behind us so this thing continues.
I think she would be saying amen to that, Mr. Jerome. Dante, how would you talk about Agnes's legacy?
The one word that sticks out to me is inclusion. She wanted to include everybody. I think her daughters said it best. She wasn't asking you, she was telling you. But she had a way of drawing you in, telling you, but she had a way of drawing you in and giving you the breadcrumbs to follow. She gave us a perfect manual, an instruction book, if you will, and she made it was a personal journey, but she also included it as a community journey. So that's I go back to the one word, inclusion.
It's a perfect word for her. I love that. Martina, this is your mama. How would you talk about your mom's legacy? Well, how would you characterize it? You're muted, sweetie. You're muted. She's being so polite. She still got herself muted. Give her there you go.
Oh, okay. Well, it's when you are living that whole process, I lived it with her. I went to the drugstore and bought the 3x5 cards so that we could go down to the card files in the library and copy everything from now to doomsday. When you look at what is happening today, her legacy is so extremely important. When I was growing up, I learned about different Black people in history, not in school, but from my mother. And with all of this technology, our kids don't have access to one of the best African-American newspapers that we used to have, that we had. You know, I thought the whole world subscribed to the Baltimore Afro-American newspaper. And so now that's lost. And we have probably a bigger job now to disseminate this information and teach children and protect it so that it doesn't get destroyed. You know, we got some crazy politicians who are trying to eliminate history. So her legacy is to remind me the struggle continues. It really does.
Thank you, Martina. Gwen, how about you? And you can talk from yourself. You don't have to talk as secretary of the board. You can speak from either place in your heart that's forward right now. Either Gwen, the family member, or Gwen, the board member, whichever place.
And Dante, the word for Agnes is you get voluntold. I just want to make sure that Cut and Dante understand that. She voluntold you what to do, voluntold you when to show up, you know, as well as cousin Jerome there volunteers you to share your DNA. So that genealogy bug, when it bites you, you know, for me, I think accountability and responsibility with giving our ancestors voice. I can look back and see children that don't know who their parents are. And I think about when I took my ancestry DNA test, and it opened up a world to me that I didn't even know existed. You know, so what Agnes legacy is to me is, don't be afraid to address an open wound. Sometimes you might have to go back in and clean it back out, but it heals. You know, with the way society is today, we cannot not talk about our history. We cannot not talk to people who don't look like us. We cannot be silent because we're going to be lost. You know, we have to share. Agnes shared in her pursuit of truth for who our ancestors were. How many doors did she open up for people who didn't look like her? On marriages, the Civil War, US colored troops. I didn't even know my second great grandfather was in the US colored troops because they just didn't talk about it back then. You know, what I've noticed at Historic Sodderly, because of Agnes, as our older generations pass away, some of those people who were the same age as me when I came to Historic Sodderly are now coming to Historic Sodderly because they want to know their history. If somebody wants to know their history, don't be silent. If you may know something about somebody's family in a good way, we don't need malicious conversation, we need facts. Let's help them connect to their ancestors. Let's help them find out who their mothers or fathers were, because whatever the situation was back then, it may have not been the best. But the fact that kinship care was there and children were raised, children were cared for, because I always believe, at least in this community, we have a beloved community where we care about those who are around us. You know, we care for those, we embrace those. Agnes did that with history. She put a name to the faces, and when there weren't faces, she had the name, and she could draw the line because she was connecting the dots. Let us bring everything into focus and know that we are all connected to each other. If we cut each other, we're all going to bleed the same color. You know, so we must continue to pursue the truth. We must be responsible with the information that we find and research and gather, and make sure that it's accurate before we sell it. Not sell it, but share it. You know, don't be afraid to ask those hard questions. You can't be. Agnes wasn't. The fact that when she met John Hanson, that she didn't hold him accountable for something that he wasn't even born for. I understand sometimes we get angry. I did, you know, because of the danger of the story that was not accurate, that was being told. That's what our children will believe unless we make sure that they have the facts about who their ancestors were, and they were not property. You know, they were people, they were proud people. As Agnes would say, we are proud of our ancestors, you know, so we must share the information because Agnes would, Agnes will, and as long as we do it, she continues to live.
Absolutely. Guys, I know we are out of time. It has been, we could talk for Agnes about her for hours. If you want more facts that and see even and maybe be able to even see some of the clips of Agnes, John Hanson Briscoe Historical Project, go look at it online. There's so much more information. There are so many other places that we can find. And there's Mr. Dante coming back. We lost him for a minute. There are more places online. You will find her research to guide you, but just know in this journey as we're going forward, Agnes has been right there at the heart and has been since her time at Southerly. You'll hear more about her influences as it has come into our Descendants Project and our Common Ground initiative next month and on March 29th, when we are having Talking and Walking Common Ground, the video Meredith directed and was premiered last year at our Day of Unity. It's going to be screened by the library, but this will be done online, so you can join it from wherever you are. You'll be able to watch some of our descendants talk about their thoughts and their experiences, and Meredith will be there. And then in April, the next Forward Together, the John Hanson Briscoe legacy will be looked at. And Ms. Gwen, did you have one more thing you wanted to say, hon?
Yes, I also want people to also check out Slackwater. Meredith, is that correct? There are oral histories there of just individuals from our communities that you, if you missed, that you want to make sure that you get the opportunity to sit and listen to those histories of our community members.
Right, if you go to the St. Mary's College Library Archives and you can go to Slackwater, you can find them.
And there was a question, we don't have time to get into it because this is a longer thing discussion, but they had asked, I just saw it, how do you suggest Black people trace their genealogy when we have gaps in records, and how do you think Southerly plays a part? Well, go watch one of Jerome's presentations. That will help give you some ideas on that right there, to give you some ideas. But really quickly, Jerome, what would you give somebody, a little piece of, or Dante, you guys are always out there. If there's a big gap, or you have a quick suggestion to give people ideas, because it's daunting.
Start with your immediate family and then work your way back incrementally. When you hit the brick wall, go to somebody for help.
Dante, how about you?
Yeah, and also what I put in the chat before I got disconnected is to, you know, as Jerome said, start immediately with yourself, work your way back, and then also start pairing your own family history to the history of the time, what's going on in your local community, what's going on at the state level, what's going on at the national level, and then begin asking the family, you know, what documentation they do have. That way you can start making a list of things that you want to go after.
Wonderful. And there is on ancestry.com, I know our former director of educational programming and partnerships, Jeannie Pirtle, had started family trees for some of the Southerly descendants. So there isn't, we don't have a lot of that on we don't have that accessible on our website, but it is on ancestry.com. And there are some, there's so much research out there still to be done, and join in. So many other messages in the chat, inspiring. Everybody, thank you so much to all of our incredible panelists for sharing your insights and your thoughts. We hope that we all will have you join us at our next upcoming presentation. And for all of us, all of you, thank you so much. And remember Agnes, as we do, with a lot of love in your hearts. Take care, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, cousins.
Bye.